The boulder had been there for 10,000 years. Waiting, Jonas Whitfield found it on a Tuesday in September, chasing a rabbit that his dog had flushed from the underbrush. The rabbit disappeared into the rocks, and Jonas stopped running, hands on knees, catching his breath, and then he looked up. The boulder was massive, 50 feet wide and 30 foot tall, a granite giant that had tumbled down from the peak sometime before humans had names for such things. It had come to rest against the mountainside at an angle, creating a natural overhang, a cave really open on one side but protected on 3 others and above. The space beneath was dry, sheltered, and large enough for a cabin, Jonas said aloud. His dog, a shepherd mix named Copper, tilted his head at the word. He'd learned to recognize that tone in his human's voice, the tone that meant a new project, a new adventure, and a new reason to spend weeks watching Jonas work while Copper supervised from a comfortable spot nearby. We could build a cabin under here, boy. The rock would be the roof. No snow, no rain, no wind from above, just walls and a door, and we'd have the safest shelter in the whole territory. Coppa's tail wagged. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the excitement. That was enough. Jonas marked the spot carefully in his mind, noted the landmarks, and headed back to town to tell everyone about his discovery. That was his first mistake. Colorado Territory, September 1st, 1889. The town of Ridgewood had exactly one opinion about Jonas Whitfield, and that opinion was largely positive with reservations. At 17, Jonas was known as the hardest-working young man in the territory. He'd been orphaned at 14 when a mining accident took his father, and instead of falling apart or fleeing to relatives back east, he'd stayed. He'd worked odd jobs, saved every penny, and eventually bought 20 acres of mountain land that nobody else wanted because it was too steep, too rocky, and too far from water. The boys got grit, people said, but not much sense. This assessment was delivered with affection rather than malice. Ridgewood was a kind town, full of people who'd come west seeking something better and found it in each other. They looked out for their own, and Jonas was one of their own. Even if he did have strange ideas, the cave cabin was, everyone agreed, his strangest idea yet. "You want to build under a rock?" said Martin Calloway, who owned the general store and served as the town's unofficial voice of reason. "A rock that's been sitting there for God knows how long, that could shift or crack or fall at any moment. It's granite, Mr. Calloway. Solid granite. No cracks that I could find. It's not going anywhere. And what happens when you light a fire inside? The smoke's got nowhere to go. I'll build a chimney, run it up the side of the boulder, vent it at the top. What happens when it rains? Water will run right down that rock and flood you out. The overhang angles outward. Water runs away from the interior, not toward it." I checked. Martin shook his head, but he was smiling. "You've got an answer for everything, don't you?" "I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks, sir. I think it can work." "Well, you've thought wrong before." "Yes, sir. But I've also thought right. And when I'm right, I'm really right." Martin laughed. He couldn't help it. The boy's confidence was infectious, even when it was probably misplaced. "Tell you what," Martin said. "I won't try to talk you out of it. You're going to do what you're going to do regardless. But I'm also not going to supply you on credit for this one. You want to build a cave cabin and you pay cash. Fair enough. And when it fails, when you come back to town with your tail between your legs, you don't get to say, 'I didn't warn you.' Also fair." Jonas extended his hand. "But when it works, you have to admit you were wrong." Martin shook on it. "Deal. Though I don't expect to be paying up on that bet." The clearing came first. The space under the boulder was littered with decades of debris, fallen branches, dead leaves, animal bones, and the scattered remnants of creatures that had used the cave for shelter before Jonas claimed it. He spent 3 full days clearing it all out, raking and sweeping and hauling until the ground beneath was bare earth, solid and level. Copper helped in his way. He investigated every bone, every interesting smell, and every corner of the cave that Jonas hadn't explored yet. He chased squirrels that had been using the space as a highway, He barked at a fox that had apparently considered the cave its property and was deeply offended by the new occupants. "Sorry, friend," Jonas told the fox. "This is ours now." The fox disappeared into the forest, and Jonas got back to work. The foundation came next. Simple wooden frames were laid out in a rectangle, marking where the cabin walls would rise. Jonas had measured carefully, making sure the structure would fit entirely beneath the overhang with room to spare. The rock ceiling was 12 feet high at the center, sloping down to 8 feet at the edges. Plenty of room for a cabin with a proper roof. Wait, a roof under a rock that was already a roof. The cabin needs its own roof, Jonas explained to Copper, who was watching him sketch plans in the dirt. Not for rain or snow, the boulder handles that, but for insulation, heat rises, and if there's nothing but rock above, the warmth will just dissipate into the stone. A wooden roof creates a buffer, keeps the heat inside where we need it. Coppa's tail wagged. He was an excellent listener. Plus, Jonas added, it'll look like a proper cabin, not just a shack under a rock. A real home. The logs came from a stand of pine half a mile up the mountain. Jonas felled them one at a time, trimmed the branches, and dragged them down to the cave using a simple sled he'd built from scrap lumber. It was brutal work. Each log weighed hundreds of pounds, and the terrain was steep and rocky. His hands blistered within the first week. The blisters broke and bled. He wrapped them in cloth, rubbed them with pine pitch to seal the wounds, and kept working. 23 logs for the walls, 12 for the roof frame, 8 for the floor, more for furniture, for the door frame, and for the countless small pieces that a cabin required. 63 logs in all. 63 trips up the mountain and back, each one taking the better part of a day. Copper made every trip with him. The dog had appointed himself supervisor of the logging operation, running ahead to scout the trail, circling back to check on Jonas's progress, and occasionally barking at nothing in particular just to make his presence known. "Good boy," Jonas would say, pausing to catch his breath. "Don't know what I'd do without you." Copper would wag his tail except for a pat on the head, and then bound off to investigate something interesting in the underbrush. He was the best coworker Jonas had ever had. The townspeople came to watch. Of course, word had spread about the crazy Whitfield boy and his cave cabin, and curious residents of Ridgewood made the trek up the mountain to see for themselves. They came in ones and twos, standing at the edge of the clearing, observing Jonas's work. "He's actually doing it," said Thomas Green, a carpenter who'd built half the houses in Ridgewood, building a cabin under a boulder. "I've never seen anything like it." "Will it work?" asked his wife, Mary. Thomas studied the construction, the way Jonas had notched the logs, the way the walls were rising steady and true, the way the whole structure fit snugly beneath the protective overhang. "It might," he admitted. "The boy knows what he's doing with the joinery. And that rock, it's not going anywhere. Must weigh 1,000 tons. More like 10,000, said Robert Harmon, who'd worked in the mines before his lungs gave out. "That's solid granite. It'll be there long after we're all dust. So the shelter's sound. The shelter's better than sound. As brilliant is what it is." Robert shook his head slowly. "I've been in mines that collapsed because the rock above wasn't stable. That rock," he pointed at the massive boulder, "that rock is as stable as they come. The boys are building the safest cabin in Colorado." Word of Robert's assessment spread through town, and the tone of the conversations shifted. People still thought Jonas was eccentric, still made jokes about living under a rock. But there was new respect mixed with the amusement now. The boy might actually know what he was doing. October brought cold, and cold brought urgency. The walls were complete 4 feet of solid log construction, notched and fitted tight, chinked with a mixture of mud and moss that would keep the wind out. The roof frame was next, and Jonas worked from dawn to dusk, racing the calendar. He'd just finished setting the main ridge beam when Martin Calloway appeared at the edge of the clearing. "Came to see how you were getting on," Martin said, approaching the construction. Heard you were making progress. Almost there. Jonas climbed down from the wall, wiping sweat from his forehead. Roof frame's done. Just need to add the shingles and I'll be weatherproof. Martin walked around the structure, examining it with a critical eye. He ran his hand along the log joints, tested the door frame, and looked up at where the wooden roof met the stone ceiling above. "This is good work," he said finally. "Better than good. This is professional work." "Thank you, sir. Where'd you learn to build like this?" "My father taught me some. The rest I figured out from books and practice." Jonas shrugged. "I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, but I learned from them." Martin was quiet for a moment, still studying the cabin. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small package. "Window glass," he said. "2 panes already cut to size. Consider it a housewarming gift, Mr. Calloway." "I can't." "You can and you will. I was wrong about this project, Jonas. I thought it was foolishness, but it's not. It's clever. It's practical, and it's going to keep you alive this winter in a way that most cabins can't." He pressed the package into Jonas's hands. "I'm not too proud to admit when I've misjudged something. Take the glass." Jonas took it. "Thank you, sir. This means a lot. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "When the snow hits and you're warm and dry under your rock, don't be too smug about it. Nobody likes a gloater." Jonas laughed. "I'll do my best." November 15th, 1889. The cabin was complete. Jonas stood at the entrance to his cave, looking at what he'd built. The cabin filled the space beneath the boulder perfectly. Log walls glowing honey gold in the afternoon light. Shingled roof angling up to meet the stone ceiling. Glass windows reflecting the forest beyond. Firewood was stacked against the cave walls on either side, enough to last months. A stone fire pit sat outside the door, smoke rising lazily into the protected space. Inside, a cast iron stove radiated heat. A bed frame filled one corner, topped with a mattress stuffed with pine needles and dried grass. A table and 2 chairs sat near the window. Shelves lined the walls, already stocked with preserved food and supplies. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't large, but it was his, and it was solid, and it was warm. Copper had already claimed his spot. A folded blanket near the stove, close enough to the heat without being too close. He looked up at Jonas with an expression of pure contentment. "We did it, boy," Jonas said. "We actually did it." Kappa's tail thumped against the floor. He'd never doubted for a moment. The blizzard came on December 8th. It started as ordinary fat snowflakes drifting down through the pines. The kind of snow that made the world quiet and clean. But by noon, the wind had picked up. By evening, it was howling. By midnight, it was a full blizzard, the worst the territory had seen in 20 years. Jonas woke to a world gone white. He couldn't see the trees, couldn't see the sky, and couldn't see anything beyond a wall of swirling snow that seemed to press against the cave entrance like a living thing. But the cave entrance was all that faced the storm. The boulder above protected him from the snow that buried everything else. The walls kept out the wind that tore through the valley. The stove kept the interior warm. Not just warm, but comfortable, almost cozy, while the temperature outside dropped to 30 below. Jonas fed the stove, made coffee, and watched the blizzard rage against his shelter. Couldn't touch him. The storm lasted 3 days. On the morning of December 11th, Jonas opened his door to a transformed world. Snow had drifted 15 feet deep in places, burying trees up to their lower branches, erasing the trails and landmarks he'd come to know. The forest was unrecognizable, but his cabin was untouched. The boulder had shed the snow like water off a duck's back. The space beneath remained clear, protected, and accessible. Jonas could walk out his door onto bare ground while the rest of the world drowned in white. He thought about the people in town and wondered how they'd fared and whether everyone had made it through. He couldn't reach them. Not yet. Not with the snow this deep and no trail to follow. But he could prepare. He could be ready to help when the time came. He spent the day stockpiling firewood, melting snow for water, and organizing his supplies. Copper stayed close, sensing the seriousness of the situation, offering silent support. People might need help, Jonas told him. When the snow settles enough to travel, we're going to check on the town. Coppa's tail wagged. He was ready. On December 14th, the snow had settled enough to move. Jonas strapped on the snowshoes he'd made in October, another project that people had called unnecessary, and set out for Ridgewood. Copper bounded through the snow beside him, occasionally disappearing entirely into drifts before leaping out again, snow-covered and delighted. The journey that normally took 2 hours took 6. The snow was deep, the landmarks buried, and the world strange and silent in the aftermath of the storm. But Jonas pressed on, following the slope of the land. Trusting his sense of direction, he found the first survivor a mile from town. She was huddled beneath a fallen tree, barely conscious, her lips blue with cold. A girl, maybe 12 years old, wearing a coat far too thin for the weather. "Hey," Jonas said, dropping to his knees beside her. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. "Cold?" she whispered. "So cold. I know. I'm going to help you. What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Sullivan." Jonas knew the Sullivans, a family that lived on the edge of town, struggling to make ends meet. Emma was the oldest of 4 children. "Where's your family, Emma? Where were you going?" "Town. We were going to town." "The roof." She coughed, her whole body shaking. "The roof collapsed. Papa sent me to get help, but the snow." "How long have you been here?" "I don't know. A day? 2 days?" Her eyes drifted closed. "Tired?" "No, no, no. Stay with me, Emma. Stay awake." Jonas pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her, adding it to her thin covering. "I'm going to carry you to my cabin. It's warm there. You'll be safe. My family. I'll come back for them. But first I need to get you warm. Understand? First you." He lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. A wisp of a girl started back toward the cave. Copper led the way, barking occasionally, seeming to understand the urgency. Emma Sullivan was the first, but not the last. Over the next 3 days, Jonas made 7 trips between his cabin and the town, his cabin and the Sullivan homestead, and his cabin and every other place where people might be in trouble. He found Emma's family, her father with a broken leg, her mother trying to keep 3 younger children warm in a half-collapsed house. He found old Mrs. Patterson, who'd run out of firewood and was burning furniture to stay alive. He found the Miller boys, teenagers who'd gotten lost hunting and spent 2 nights in a snow cave, alive but barely. He brought them all to the cave. The cabin that was sized for 1 person somehow accommodated 11. They slept in shifts, shared food rationed carefully, and kept the stove burning day and night. The boulder above protected them all, indifferent to the chaos below, solid as it had been for 10,000 years. Thomas Sullivan, Emma's father, watched Jonas work the way he organized the survivors, distributed supplies, kept everyone calm, and focused on survival. "You built this yourself?" Thomas asked, his voice rough with pain from his broken leg. "Yes, sir. Under a rock." "Yes, sir." Thomas shook his head slowly. "People said you were crazy, said you were building a death trap." "I know what people said. They were wrong." Thomas's eyes were wet. "They were so wrong. You saved my daughter. You saved my whole family. You saved all of us." Jonas didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to tending the fire. The rescue party from Ridgewood arrived on December 18th. They came on snowshoes and skis. 12 men from town, led by Martin Calloway, searching for survivors in the aftermath of the storm. They found Jonas's cave by following the smoke from his chimney, a thin gray line rising against the white landscape like a beacon. "Good God," Martin breathed when he saw the scene. 11 people crowded into a cabin built under a boulder. All of them alive, all of them warm, all of them safe because a 17-year-old boy had done something that everyone said was impossible. Martin. Jonas emerged from the cabin, Copper at his heels. "Good to see you, Jonas." Martin's voice was thick. "We thought when the storm hit, we thought I'm fine. Better than fine. The cabin held up perfectly. I can see that." Martin looked around at the boulder, the construction, the impossible shelter that had become a refuge. "How many people do you have in there?" 11, including me, the Sullivants, Mrs. Patterson, the Miller boys, a few others who needed shelter. 11 people in a cabin sized for one. It's tight, but it's warm. And warm is what matters. Martin stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something Jonas had never seen him do before. He laughed. Not a mocking laugh, not a skeptical laugh, but a genuine laugh of joy and relief and something that might have been wonder. "I owe you an apology," Martin said. "I owe you a dozen apologies. I said this was foolishness. I said it would fail. I said you'd come crawling back with your tail between your legs. You did say that, and I was wrong. I was completely, absolutely, utterly wrong." Martin extended his hand. "You built the safest shelter in Colorado, Jonas. You saved 11 lives. I don't think I'm sorry covers it, but it's all I've got." Jonas shook his hand. "You gave me window glass. That's worth at least one apology." Martin laughed again. "I'll give you all the window glass you want. I'll give you anything you want. Name it. Help me get these people to town safely. That's all I want. Done." The story spread as stories do. By spring, everyone in the territory had heard about the cave cabin. The boy who'd built it, the 11 lives it had saved during the worst blizzard in 20 years. People came from miles around to see it, to marvel at the boulder, to shake Jonas's hand and ask how he'd known. "I didn't know," Jonas told them all. "I just thought it made sense. The rock was already there. The shelter was already there. I just added walls." Most of them nodded and went away, satisfied with the answer. But a few stayed longer, asked more questions, and eventually asked the question that mattered most. "Can you teach me to build one?" Jonas always said yes. Over the next 5 years, Jonas Whitfield built or helped build 17 cave cabins across the Colorado Territory. Not all of them were under boulders. Some used cliff overhangs. Some used natural rock shelters. Some used combinations of stone and timber that created similar effects. But they all shared the same principle. Work with the land instead of against it. Use what nature provides. Build shelters that are protected by something stronger than human construction alone. He took on apprentices, young men and women who wanted to learn, who saw value in his methods, and who understood that survival wasn't about fighting the wilderness, but about finding your place within it. Thomas Sullivan's son, Michael, was the first. The boy, who'd nearly lost his whole family in the blizzard, became one of Jonas's best students, eventually building his own cave cabin and starting his own family in it. Emma Sullivan, the girl Jonas had found dying beneath a fallen tree, became a teacher. She opened a school in Ridgewood and made sure that every child learned the basics of wilderness survival. "Because you never know," she told them, "when you'll need to save yourself or someone else." Martin Calloway never stopped apologizing for doubting Jonas. He also never stopped sending supplies up the mountain window. Glass, iron, hardware, tools, and anything else Jonas needed for his projects. "Consider it a standing debt," Martin said. "I'll be paying it off for the rest of my life." Copper died in the spring of 1897 at the age of 11. He'd been slowing down for months, his muzzle white, his joints stiff, his eyes cloudy but still bright with love. On his last morning, he'd walked outside with Jonas, sat in the patch of sunlight at the cave entrance, and watched the valley wake up one final time. "Good boy," Jonas whispered, stroking his fur. "The best boy. I couldn't have done any of this without you." Coppa's tail wagged one last time. Then he closed his eyes, sighed deeply, and was gone. Jonas buried him beneath a pine tree near the cave entrance, marking the spot with a flat stone etched with simple words. "Copper, he was there from the beginning. Best friend, Best partner. 1000.886 to 1000.897. He got other dogs over the years. You had to live alone in the mountains. But Copper was special. Copper had been there when Jonas found the boulder, had supervised the construction, and had warmed the cabin with his presence during that first winter. Copper had helped save 11 lives. In his own way, some friends are irreplaceable. You just have to be grateful you had them at all. Jonas Whitfield lived in his cave cabin until 1943, when he died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 71. He'd seen the world change around him. Electricity came, then automobiles, then airplanes overhead and radio voices from distant cities, but the cabin stayed the same. The boulder stayed the same. The shelter he'd built at 17 remained solid and warm, a testament to the power of working with nature instead of against it. He'd married in 1895 a woman named Sarah, who'd come west from Boston seeking adventure, and found it in a man who lived under a rock. They'd raised 3 children in the cave cabin, expanding it over the years to accommodate the growing family. Their grandchildren had been born there, had learned to walk on those wooden floors, and had fallen asleep to the sound of wind against the boulder that kept them safe. His funeral was the largest Ridgewood had ever seen. People came from across the state to pay respects. Former apprentices, families he'd helped during storms, and children and grandchildren of the 11 survivors from that first blizzard. They stood in the snow outside the cave cabin and told stories about the boy who'd built something everyone said was impossible. Martin Calloway's grandson gave the eulogy. His grandfather had passed 20 years before, but not before making sure the next generation knew the story. Jonas Whitfield taught us something important. Young Martin said, "He taught us that the best ideas often look crazy at first. He taught us that the wilderness isn't our enemy. It's our partner if we're smart enough to listen to it. He taught us that one person with a vision and the will to work can save lives, change minds, and build something that lasts." He paused, looking up at the boulder that had sheltered Jonas for over 50 years. "That rock's been there for 10,000 years. It'll be there for 10,000 more. And because of Jonas Whitfield, it'll never just be a rock again. It'll be a home, a shelter, and a reminder that sometimes the crazy ideas are the best ones." The cabin still stands. The boulder still protects it, as it has since before humans had names for such things. Visitors can tour the site, see the original construction, and read the plaques that explain what happened here during the blizzard of 1889. Jonas's great-great-granddaughter lives there now in a structure that's been updated with modern conveniences but still retains the original bones. The log walls, the wooden roof, and the way the whole thing fits snugly beneath the protective overhang. She keeps a dog, of course, a shepherd mix, because some traditions are worth maintaining. The epitaph on Jonas's grave is simple. Jonas Whitfield 1872 to 1943. He found shelter in the stone and shared it with the world. Coppa's grave marker stands nearby, still legible after all these years. He was there from the beginning, and every winter, when the snow falls and the wind howls and the world remembers that it can be dangerous, the cabin under the boulder stays warm, protected, and safe, just like Jonas always knew it would. Some ideas are too good to die with the people who have them. This was one of them,